Hey everyone, I hope that you're all having a great week. I decided this week to try and do a video post instead of a written post. This isn't something that I do a lot, so just bear with me because I'm way more comfortable hiding behind my computer than I am standing in front of this camera. So we'll see how it all goes. But this week we're talking about the part of Ephesians 3:20 that says all that we could ask or think. Last week we talked about that he can do exceeding abundantly above, and this week we're just continuing on in that verse. In thinking about what I wanted to talk about this week, I kept coming back to the story of creation, to the creation story. I don't know about you, but for me personally, I think that outside of Jesus' death and resurrection on the cross, that creation is the single most greatest miracle that God ever did. God took nothing. He took emptiness, void, darkness, and he created this universe that we live in, and so much of it we don't even see. And if you think about it, even the part that we do see is the fallen, breaking down, continually changing world. It's not the perfect creation that God intended from the beginning. It's not where we started at. So when you think about where it must have started at, it's just overwhelming. But I asked 3 friends 2 questions this week, and I'm going to ask you guys to weigh in on Facebook this week and answer these questions too. Even though I'm going to tell you what they said, it might be a little disadvantage, but just think about this as just a way to think about what we're talking about this week. They're not biblical questions. They're not anything. They're just a way for us to get to a point. So the first question was, let's pretend that before God created the universe and everything in it, before Genesis 1:1, that you were there with him. Pretend that he asked you what it is that you wanted the world to look like, what you wanted it to be like, what you wanted him to create. What would you tell God? That was question number 1. I'm going to read you the answers that I got from my 3 friends. The first one said, that's tough since there would be nothing to compare it to. How would we know what to ask for? Maybe light since it was dark, some type of place to rest, but there was no weariness then. The second one said, probably restoration of what was destroyed during the battle between Satan and the angels that did not rebel. I'm not sure I would want to create humanity, a lot of variables. A typical person would probably name their favorite part of nature or the garden. It would be interesting to see answers because if I'm with God and he's creating, I would have the same mind and desire as him, for someone to choose to love him. The third lady said, I honestly have no idea. I can say that it would not have been near as awesome as what he did do. Kind of scary to think about what I would dream of. 3 amazing women, 3 very different answers. But then I asked the second question. And the second question was, what would your reaction be if you knew that whatever your answer was to God, that's exactly what he would create? Nothing more and nothing less. The first lady's response was, that would be totally humbling. I would probably wonder, why me? Why my ideas? The second one said, I would say, create what you think is best, God, without even thinking about it. The third one said, I don't know what I would say, but I know that I would be disappointed to know that he didn't take any creative, all-knowing liberties. 3 different ladies, 3 different answers, but if you really stop and think about it, their answers were all focused around the same idea and the same thought process. So what they really were saying when they answered question number 2 was, I'm not as qualified as God is to make this decision. So God, you just go ahead and do what you do best. So we're going to come back to that thought in just a minute. In chapter 5, one of the things that Priscilla talks about are the boxes that we put God in. The way she talked about it was there was like this spectrum of God's power and his ability, and we have these God boxes that we tend to create, and everyone has their own shape, size, box, and everyone puts it in various places along that spectrum. And there's two places that I want to talk about today on that spectrum. Some of us sometimes are in the category of people who think that we know that God does all these big things, and we know that he can heal diseases. We know that he can provide financially. We know that he can restore marriages. And sometimes we may think that he's so busy doing all those big things, he doesn't have time, or he doesn't care about our little everyday things. So we don't ask him for everyday things. We don't ask him for help when we can't find our car keys, or when we're trying to figure out what we're going to have for dinner, or the little things in life that sometimes frustrate us, but sometimes we don't even think to ask him about it. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where some of us are too, where even though we know that God can do anything, we don't mind asking him for the little things, but when it comes to the big things, there are multiple reasons why we don't ask him for them, or we don't keep asking. We don't continue to pray for those things. There's lots of reasons, and I think everybody's reasons are different. For some people, it may be that they have believed a lie from the enemy, that they're not worth God's help, that they got themselves into that situation that they're in, and that God has other people to worry about, and he just doesn't want to do it, which isn't true. But then for some of us, sometimes it could be as simple as we haven't experienced the big things. We haven't experienced the big miracles. Maybe we've heard about the revival that happened 20 years ago, and Miss So-and-so came in a wheelchair and she left out running. And, that's all great and wonderful, but we've never seen that for ourselves. So sometimes we just think that we're just never going to experience that. And so just out of that doubt, we just don't ask. But I want you to take a minute and think back through the Word of God. How many big, wonderful, amazing miracles started with something small? When Jesus fed the 5,000, he started with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Not only was it enough to feed all those people, but he had 12 baskets left over. That is exceeding and abundantly above and beyond, where he started with something small and did a great thing. Creation itself is an example. Like we said earlier, God took nothing and made something so amazingly beautiful and complex that scientists today still haven't discovered all that there is to know about the world that God created. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm about to say. God can do anything he wants to do with or without our help. But what if the thing that you need in your life, what if you're it? What if God is just waiting for you to give him something small so that he can do something big? What does all of this have to do with our creation scenario? Well, I asked 3 ladies. I could have asked more, and I'm pretty sure, though, that if I had continued asking more women, I would have gotten similar responses, and I think that it would have sort of turned out very similarly. When we're faced with situations in life, this is what we typically do. We tell God about our problems, and then we tell him exactly how we want him to fix them. Jesus said in John chapter 14, "You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it." So we need to ask him. He wants us to ask him. But sometimes I think that we need to be careful how we ask him and what we ask him for. If we're not careful, we're going to keep God in these God boxes and limit the possibilities of how he may answer our prayers. He could choose to do greater whether we ask him or not, but let's just be careful that we don't limit by how we ask what God may do. So the second question that I asked, what I wanted to get at with that thought was, what if whenever we ask God for something that we got exactly what we asked for? Would it change the way we asked? Would it change what we asked for? In our creation scenario, it did. When we're looking at a pretend scenario, one that didn't happen for real and that doesn't directly affect our lives, we all know deep down inside that God is much more qualified than we are to decide how to work things out. But when it gets personal and involves us directly, so many times we want to stay in control and just tell God what we want Him to do for us. So I want to challenge you ladies this week, me included. I'm not above or beyond any of this, to start breaking down some God boxes. Let's take God out of the box that you have Him in. Invite Him to just come in and do what He does best. Invite Him to be the all-knowing, all-powerful God that He is. I'm in no way saying not to tell Him how you feel or not to communicate with Him, because He wants us to do that. We have to have that personal relationship with Him. We can tell God anything. He already knows anyway, so we might as well share it with Him. And that's what we should be doing. But instead of telling Him how we feel and then telling Him how to fix it for us, let's just tell Him how we feel and invite Him to be God in the middle of our situations. I want to thank you ladies for showing up here every week and showing up on Facebook and commenting and being a part of our conversation. I will post some questions this week, and please join us there and join the conversation. But I also want to remind you ladies that you guys are not limited to just answering the questions that I post each week. Please, please, please post your own thoughts, your own comments. If you have prayer requests or praise reports you want to share, post those. If you just read a great Devo online today and you feel like you want to share it, post that. We just want to be a community of women that are seeking God together, and we're on this journey all together. So I just want to thank you ladies again. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you guys on Facebook. Bye.